Everyone refused to save the paralyzed chief's daughter, but one quiet cowboy decided to save her. In a quiet, sun-drenched village, nestled between rolling hills and endless stretches of dusty plains, life moved slowly. The villagers were simple people who relied on their traditions, and everyone knew everyone else. Children ran barefoot through the dirt roads, women carried water from the well, and men worked in the fields or tended to their animals. The village was peaceful, almost untouched by the world beyond, but within this calm, there was a family facing a struggle that had the entire village whispering. Amara, the chief's only daughter, had once been a lively girl full of energy and laughter. She loved running across the fields, chasing butterflies, and climbing the old oak tree near the riverbank. Her laughter was like music that made everyone smile. But that life changed one sunny afternoon when an accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. The villagers were shocked. No one could forget the day the news spread like wildfire. Amara, who had once danced and played like the other children, could no longer walk. Her small world shrank to the courtyard of her home, and her laughter slowly faded. The chief, a strong and respected man named Harun, was devastated. He had seen many hardships in his life, but nothing shook him as much as seeing his daughter trapped in a body that refused to obey her. He tried everything. He sought out local healers who used traditional methods, hoping for a miracle. He traveled to nearby towns to find doctors, specialists, and anyone who could help. But one by one, they all refused. Some said it was impossible. Others claimed it was too expensive or too complicated. A few even said that Amara's condition was a punishment or a sign from the heavens. The chief refused to believe these words, but the villagers slowly began to accept them as truth. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Amara's world grew smaller. She spent her time looking out of the window, watching other children play in the sun, while she remained trapped in a wheelchair. The house that was once filled with laughter now echoed with silence. Even her closest friends began to drift away. They didn't know how to play with her anymore, and some were too scared of what might happen if they tried to lift or help her. Amara began to feel invisible, as if the world had forgotten her. The villagers, bound by their fear and old beliefs, whispered about the family. "It's too difficult," they said. "We can't help her and no one else can." Their words stung, not because they were mean, but because they reflected a truth the chief already felt in his heart. The village was kind, but they were also cautious. Helping someone like Amara required effort, patience, and courage, qualities they admired but rarely practiced when faced with the impossible. Amid this despair, a figure appeared on the horizon. Eli, a quiet cowboy with a worn hat and a gentle smile, rode into the village on his old horse. He was not from the village, and most people had never seen him before. His clothes were simple, his boots dusty from travel, and his eyes seemed to carry stories from faraway places. He didn't speak much, but there was something about him that made people take notice. He didn't rush, didn't boast, and didn't seem interested in the gossip of the village. He simply observed as if he was searching for something or someone. Eli noticed the sadness hanging over the chief's household. He saw the empty swing in the yard, the wheelchair that never moved, and the silence that filled the rooms. But he also noticed something else. He saw Amara sitting by the window, her hands resting on the wheels of her chair, staring at the world outside with a spark in her eyes. That spark told him she was not defeated. She was waiting for someone brave enough to believe in her, to try when everyone else had given up. Most villagers avoided Eli, wary of outsiders and suspicious of strangers. They whispered among themselves, wondering why he had come and what he wanted. Some even suggested he would leave after a day or two, just like the others who had passed through the village. But Eli did not leave. Instead, he approached the chief quietly, bowing his head in respect. "I have heard about your daughter," Eli said softly. "I want to help her." The chief looked at him with disbelief. "Everyone has refused. Do you think you are different?" he asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion and worry. Eli smiled gently. "I do not know if I can succeed," he admitted, "but I will try. I will not give up before even starting." The chief was not sure whether to trust him. His past attempts had ended in disappointment. But there was something in Eli's eyes, a calm determination, a patient confidence, that made him pause. Perhaps, just perhaps, this quiet cowboy could be the hope Amara needed. At first, the villagers mocked Eli. They called him foolish, stubborn, even crazy for thinking he could help a girl everyone had given up on. They whispered that he was wasting his time and that he should leave before he embarrassed himself. But Eli paid no attention. He spent his days watching Amara, learning her strengths and her struggles. He noticed the small things, the way she could still move her fingers, the way her eyes lit up at a kind word, the way she tried to hold a cup or a toy despite her paralysis. Eli began to plan. He did not bring expensive machines or strange medicines. He brought patience, creativity, and belief. He crafted simple exercises, tiny tools, and gentle stretches that could help Amara regain some movement. He encouraged her to try, even when she was scared or frustrated. Slowly, he built a routine that felt less like treatment and more like play. Amara was hesitant at first. She had been told so many times that nothing could help her. She had lived with failure and disappointment for months, and fear had built a wall around her heart. But Eli did not rush her. He waited, always patient, always kind. He celebrated small victories, like when she could lift her arm or wiggle her toes. Each little success was a spark of hope, slowly breaking through the darkness that had enveloped her life. The chief watched from a distance, unsure whether to hope or to fear another disappointment. But he could not deny the change he saw in his daughter. For the first time in months, she laughed softly when Eli joked with her. For the first time, she reached for a toy on her own, and her fingers grasped it firmly. And for the first time, she looked at him with the quiet determination he remembered from her childhood, the same spark that made him proud when she ran across the fields before the accident. Eli continued his gentle work, always observing, always encouraging. He treated Amara not as a burden, not as someone broken, but as a girl capable of more than anyone believed. And in this quiet way, without boasting or demanding attention, he began to change not just her life, but the hearts of those around him. The villagers who once whispered doubts now began to watch in silence. They saw a quiet cowboy, patient and kind, refusing to give up when everyone else had. They saw a girl, small but brave, daring to try again despite the odds. And slowly the whispers began to change, from doubt to wonder, from fear to hope. And so in this small, dusty village, under the sun and the wide-open sky, a story began. A story of courage, patience, and belief. A story where a quiet cowboy might just change the life of a paralyzed girl, and perhaps the heart of the entire village. It was the beginning of something extraordinary, a reminder that sometimes it only takes one person to believe when everyone else has given up. Eli's presence in the village had stirred curiosity, but also doubt. The villagers were cautious and skeptical, watching him quietly from behind walls and fences. Many wondered why a stranger would care about a girl everyone else had given up on. "Why bother?" they whispered. "It is hopeless. No one can help her walk again." Others were more blunt, openly mocking him. They said he was wasting his time, that he would fail, and that the chief was foolish to let him try. Even the chief's closest advisors shook their heads in worry. They feared disappointment, thinking that Amara's hope would be crushed all over again. Eli, however, did not respond to the whispers or the skepticism. He simply went about his work with quiet determination. Every morning, he would arrive at the chief's house just after sunrise, when the air was cool and the village was still waking. He would greet Amara gently, asking how she felt, and then begin the small routines he had designed for her. These were not harsh exercises. They were simple movements, stretches, and activities meant to awaken her muscles and build her confidence. At first, Amara resisted. She had been told for so long that she could not walk, that she had no strength left in her legs. Fear had grown in her heart, and she was afraid of failing again. She would shake her head when Eli suggested trying a stretch, and tears would form in her eyes when she tried and could not complete it. "I can't," she said more than once, her voice small and trembling. "It's too hard, I will never be able to do it." But Eli never gave up. He knelt beside her wheelchair, speaking in calm, encouraging tones. "I know it's hard," he said softly, "but I also know you are stronger than you think. You have more courage than anyone realizes. Let's try together, just a little at a time." He would show her how to move her legs gently, how to shift her weight, and how to strengthen her muscles slowly. He celebrated even the smallest victories: a finger lifted, a toe wiggled, a tiny bend of her knee. To anyone else, these might have seemed insignificant, but to Amara, each little movement was a spark of hope. The villagers continued to watch, some still doubtful, but a few began to feel a shift. They noticed that Amara's eyes were brighter than they had been in months. She began to smile again, even if only a little, and she laughed quietly at Eli's jokes and stories. It was as if a light had returned to her life, a light that the villagers had thought would never shine again. Despite the small successes, the journey was far from easy. There were days when Amara became frustrated, throwing her arms up in despair. There were days when she refused to even try, slumping in her chair, convinced that nothing could change. On those days, Eli would simply sit beside her, holding her hand and wait. He understood that progress was not only about physical strength but about courage and belief. He did not scold or force her. He encouraged and inspired. Slowly, he began to teach her patience, showing her that every small step mattered, even if it was invisible to others. Eli also observed the village carefully, learning about its people and their ways. He noticed that many villagers were afraid of the unknown, that they had given up on Amara not out of cruelty, but because of fear. Fear of failure, fear of effort, fear of upsetting the natural order of things. Eli respected their beliefs but quietly challenged them with his actions. He showed them that sometimes courage could overcome fear, and that hope could be stronger than doubt. One afternoon, as the sun hung high in the sky and the air shimmered with heat, Eli tried a new approach. He brought a small wooden bar, carefully crafted, and placed it in front of Amara. "This will help you balance," he said. "We will go slowly." "I will be right here." Amara hesitated, her hands shaking as she reached for it. The villagers watched from a distance, holding their breath. Some doubted she could even grasp the bar, let alone stand. With Eli's patient guidance, Amara placed her hands on the bar. Her legs trembled, and for a moment she thought she would fall, but Eli steadied her, supporting her carefully. "You can do this," he whispered. "Just one small step." Slowly, almost painfully, Amara shifted her weight. Her legs wobbled, her heart pounded, but she did not give up. That small effort marked a turning point. For the first time in months, she felt the possibility of standing, of moving forward, of regaining some control over her life. The chief watched silently, his heart heavy with emotion. He could not believe what he was seeing. Could this quiet cowboy, this stranger, actually succeed where everyone else had failed? He dared not hope too much, yet he could not look away. The villagers, too, were beginning to whisper, but this time the words were different. Maybe he can help," some said. Others were more cautious, but even they could not deny the change they saw in Amara. Eli's methods were not fast, and progress was never linear. There were setbacks, days when Amara could not lift her legs, when she cried in frustration, and when she begged to stop. But Eli was consistent. He returned every day, encouraging her gently, reminding her of her strength, and never letting her fear dictate the outcome. He treated her not as a patient or a project, but as a partner in this journey. Together, they worked through the difficulties, building trust, hope, and determination. As weeks passed, the small improvements began to add up. Amara could hold herself upright with support for longer periods. She could move her legs slightly without falling. She began to dream again, imagining herself running across the fields, playing with friends, and climbing the old oak tree near the river. Each dream, each tiny movement, strengthened her resolve. She realized that she was not powerless, that she could fight, and that there was someone who believed in her no matter what. The villagers, once critical and skeptical, were slowly drawn into the story. They began to admire Eli's patience and dedication. They noticed that his quiet determination was more powerful than any harsh words or promises. They saw that hope, when nurtured, could grow even in the most unlikely places. And they began to rethink their own doubts, their own fears, and the way they had abandoned Amara when she needed them most. One day, a young boy approached Eli hesitantly. "Can I help too?" he asked. "I want to see if I can do something to make her stronger." Eli smiled and nodded. "Yes," he said, "every little bit helps. Together, we can make a difference." Slowly, other children and villagers began to join, offering small gestures of support, helping Amara with exercises, fetching water, or simply cheering her on. What had begun as a solitary effort by a quiet cowboy was now slowly becoming a collective effort, a community rallying around a girl they had once abandoned. Despite all the encouragement, challenges remained. There were moments when Amara's frustration returned, when fear gripped her heart, and when she doubted herself. There were days when Eli had to invent new exercises, adjust his methods, and find ways to motivate her. He experimented patiently, never giving up, and always believing that each small effort mattered. Through every struggle, every setback, and every tear, Amara grew stronger, not just in her body, but in her spirit. Eli's presence had begun to transform more than just Amara. It had begun to change the village. People who had once whispered doubts now whispered words of encouragement. They had begun to understand that courage was not loud or boastful, but quiet and persistent. They had begun to learn that hope could be nurtured, and that sometimes one person's belief could inspire an entire community. And so, the days passed in the small village. Sunlight bathed the fields, children played nearby, and Amara continued her slow but steady progress. Eli remained by her side, patient, kind, and unwavering. He had arrived as a stranger, but he was slowly becoming a part of the village's story, a story of determination, hope, and the quiet power of belief. Little did the villagers know that this was only the beginning. The true challenges, the real tests of courage and strength, were yet to come. But for now, a spark had been lit in Amara's heart, a spark that promised a brighter future, and a quiet cowboy had proven that sometimes, it only takes one person to believe when everyone else has given up. The days grew longer, and the sun climbed higher over the village, but progress for Amara remained slow and challenging. Each morning, Eli arrived at the chief's house with the same quiet determination, his hat shadowing his eyes as he studied her small, trembling movements. Amara had grown stronger in spirit, but her body still resisted. Her legs, stiff and unyielding after months of immobility, often failed her, and even the simplest exercises became mountains she had to climb every day. Amara's frustration was real. She had begun to believe that perhaps she could make a difference, but every setback reminded her of how fragile her hope was. Sometimes, when she tried to lift herself, her muscles would refuse, and she would collapse back into the wheelchair. Tears often ran down her cheeks, not just from pain, but from the fear that maybe she was too weak, that perhaps the dream of walking again was impossible. Eli never forced her. He would kneel beside her, his calm voice steady like a river. "It's okay to feel tired," he said one afternoon, wiping a tear from her cheek. "It's okay to be scared. The important thing is to keep trying, even a little at a time." He would guide her through simple stretches, showing her the way without overwhelming her. He celebrated each tiny improvement, whether it was her ability to lift her foot slightly or to move her toes. For Eli, these were victories, and he made sure Amara saw them the same way. Yet not every day was filled with encouragement. Some days she refused to do anything at all. She would sit silently, staring out of the window, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. On those days, even Eli struggled to find the right words. He understood that progress was not just physical, it was emotional. Fear and self-doubt were strong opponents, and they often seemed stronger than any exercise or tool he could bring. But Eli had patience. He would sit quietly with her, sometimes telling stories of people who had overcome impossible odds, sometimes simply holding her hand and waiting until she felt ready. The villagers continued to watch, some with admiration, others with skepticism. The whispers had changed slightly. "Maybe he really can help," a young girl said as she peeked over a fence. An older man shook his head but stayed silent, unable to ignore the gradual change he saw in Amara. Even the chief, though cautious, began to allow himself to hope. He watched from a distance, unsure whether to believe in what he was seeing or fear another disappointment. One of the biggest challenges came when Eli decided it was time for Amara to try standing with a small wooden walker he had built. It was simple, sturdy, and designed to support her weight while giving her a chance to find balance. When he first suggested it, Amara's eyes widened with fear. "I can't do it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What if I fall?" Eli smiled gently. "You won't fall because I will be right here. I will support you every step of the way," he said. "Just take one small step at a time." The first attempt was difficult. Amara gripped the walker tightly, her knuckles white as her legs wobbled like thin sticks. She tried to lift her foot, then lost her balance and collapsed back into the wheelchair. Her tears flowed freely, mixing with frustration and fear. The villagers who had gathered quietly to watch shook their heads, thinking the effort was hopeless. But Eli remained calm. He lifted her gently, whispered encouragement, and suggested they try again tomorrow. The next day they tried again, and the day after that. Each attempt was met with fear and hesitation, but also a small spark of determination. Slowly, Amara began to trust her body again. She realized that failure did not mean defeat, and that every tiny movement mattered. With Eli's patience and support, she began to find her balance, even if it was only for a few seconds at a time. During these weeks, Eli's bond with Amara grew stronger. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet reflection. He encouraged her to dream again, to imagine running across the fields and climbing the old oak tree she loved. These dreams, once distant and impossible, now felt closer, like stars within reach. Amara began to believe not just in the exercises, but in herself. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. The villagers began to notice subtle changes in themselves as well. Their hearts softened as they saw Amara's determination, and their admiration for Eli grew. The quiet cowboy who had arrived as a stranger was slowly transforming the village. People who had once mocked or doubted him now whispered words of encouragement. Children began to bring small gifts or assist with exercises. Even those who had been most skeptical began to watch with quiet hope, realizing that change, though slow, was possible. Despite these small victories, the journey was far from easy. One day, after a particularly challenging exercise, Amara collapsed in exhaustion. Her legs shook uncontrollably, her face was flushed, and her eyes welled with tears. "I can't do it," she sobbed. "I'm too weak. I'll never walk again." Eli knelt beside her, holding her hand and speaking softly. "Amara, you are not weak. You are strong, stronger than you know. Every time you try, every time you don't give up, you grow stronger. This is just a small step on a long journey." He helped her regain her composure, and slowly she began to try again. Step by step, movement by movement, she learned to trust her body. She realized that failure was not the end, but a part of the process. Each setback was a lesson, a reminder that persistence and courage were more important than immediate success. The villagers, witnessing this struggle, began to understand the power of patience and hope. They realized that giving up too soon was easy, but true courage required persistence. Eli's quiet determination inspired them in ways they had not expected. He did not demand recognition or praise. He simply showed, through action and patience, that belief in someone could create real change. As the weeks turned into months, Amara's progress became more noticeable. She could stand for longer periods, shift her weight without falling, and even take small steps with the walker. Her confidence grew, and with it, her spirit. She began to speak with hope in her voice, to laugh more freely, and to dream of a future where she could move independently again. Eli continued to challenge her, gently increasing the difficulty of exercises while always providing support. He never pushed her too hard, understanding that physical strength and emotional courage had to grow together. He encouraged her to celebrate small victories, and together they marked each milestone, no matter how minor it seemed to others. Through all of this, the chief watched quietly. His heart was filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Could this quiet cowboy really succeed where everyone else had failed? Could Amara truly walk again? The journey was far from over, but the spark of possibility had been lit. The chief could see his daughter growing stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. And he began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the impossible could be possible. Amara's struggle became a story of courage and perseverance. Each day was a test, a challenge to push past fear, frustration, and doubt. But with Eli's guidance, patience, and unwavering belief, she began to see herself not as a helpless girl in a wheelchair, but as someone capable of change, growth, and triumph. And so, in the quiet village under the endless sky, the struggle continued. Each step, each effort, each tear and smile brought Amara closer to the day she might walk again. Eli remained by her side, patient and steadfast, a constant reminder that true courage was quiet, persistent, and unwavering. The villagers, once doubtful, began to witness a transformation, not just in Amara, but in the power of hope, belief, and the impact of one person willing to never give up. The road ahead was still long, filled with challenges and setbacks, but a change had begun. Amara had learned the first lesson of true strength, that even when life seems impossible, perseverance and courage could create small victories that eventually lead to great triumphs. And Eli, the quiet cowboy, had become the guide, the mentor, and the friend who would walk with her every step of the way. The sun rose slowly over the village, painting the sky with soft streaks of gold and pink. Birds chirped in the distance, and the gentle rustle of leaves filled the morning air. For Amara, the day began like any other, yet there was a sense of anticipation in her heart. She had been working with Eli for many months now, learning to trust her body again, and the progress, though slow, had been steady. Today felt different, though she could not yet explain why. Eli arrived at the chief's house as usual, his horse kicking up dust along the village path. He carried with him the small wooden walker he had crafted weeks ago. It was simple, sturdy, and designed to support Amara's weight while allowing her to find her balance. He placed it carefully in front of her, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. There were no words, only understanding. Eli knew that today might be the day Amara would take a step that would change everything. Amara hesitated at first. Fear still lingered in her heart, the fear of falling, the fear of failure, the fear of disappointing herself and everyone around her. She had stumbled so many times before, and the memory of those failures weighed heavily. Her legs trembled slightly as she reached for the walker. I don't know if I can do it," she whispered, her voice small but determined. Eli knelt beside her, his eyes calm and encouraging. "You can," he said softly. "You have been preparing for this moment for a long time. I will be right here. Just trust yourself and take it one step at a time." He offered his hand, and Amara took it, feeling the warmth and steadiness of his support. With careful effort, she lifted herself to stand, gripping the walker tightly. Her legs shook violently, and for a moment she thought she would collapse. The villagers who had begun gathering outside held their breath. They had been watching her progress quietly for weeks, whispering to one another, some in hope and others in doubt. Today they could witness something extraordinary, though they did not yet know it. Eli guided her slowly, showing her how to shift her weight from one foot to the other. "That's it," he whispered. "You're doing it. Keep going." The first step was tentative, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Amara's heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She felt a strange sense of freedom, a sensation she had not experienced in months, maybe even years. Step by step, she moved forward, her legs trembling with every motion. Eli remained close, offering support but letting her balance as much as she could on her own. The villagers watched in stunned silence. They had doubted, mocked, and given up hope, yet here was a girl, paralyzed for months, taking her first real steps with the help of a quiet, patient cowboy. Some could not help but shed tears, amazed by the courage and determination unfolding before them. Amara faltered once, nearly losing her balance, but Eli's hand steadied her instantly. "It's okay," he said softly. "You can do this. You are stronger than you realize." She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and continued. Step by step, she walked a little further, her confidence growing with each motion. It was not easy. Her legs ached, her muscles screamed, and her heart pounded. But she did not give up. The fear that had held her captive for so long was slowly melting away, replaced by determination and hope. The chief, standing nearby, could hardly contain his emotions. He had watched so many people refuse to help his daughter, leaving her isolated and hopeless. But Eli's patient guidance had changed everything. Tears ran down his cheeks as he saw Amara move, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to hope fully. "That's my daughter," he whispered under his breath, pride and joy mixing in his voice. The villagers, too, began to cheer quietly. Some clapped softly, afraid to startle her, while others smiled with amazement. A few children ran up to encourage her, offering words of support and small cheers. The atmosphere, once heavy with doubt and fear, now pulsed with hope and excitement. They had witnessed despair for so long that this moment felt almost magical, a miracle born from patience, courage, and unwavering belief. Eli guided Amara a little further, then stepped back slightly, letting her feel the independence she had longed for. She wobbled, almost fell, but managed to steady herself. A smile spread across her face, a mix of triumph and disbelief. I did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I really did it." Her laughter, bright and clear, rang through the courtyard. It was a sound the village had not heard for months, perhaps even years. Children ran to her, laughing and cheering, and even the older villagers wiped away tears. Amara had done what everyone thought was impossible. She had taken her first steps, not just with physical strength, but with courage and determination. The days that followed were filled with continued progress. Eli introduced new exercises, guiding her to walk longer distances and improve her balance. Each day, she grew stronger, more confident, and more independent. The villagers, once skeptical, began to participate more actively, offering encouragement, carrying her small walker, or simply celebrating each tiny victory alongside her. Amara began to dream more vividly again. She imagined running through the fields, climbing the old oak tree near the riverbank, and playing with friends just like before. These dreams, once distant and impossible, now felt closer than ever. And every small step she took was a reminder that nothing was truly impossible when someone believed in you. Eli, as always, remained patient and calm. He never boasted, never demanded recognition, and never rushed her. His quiet determination had guided Amara through her struggles, and now he watched with pride as she embraced her new strength. He knew the journey was not yet over, but he also knew that she had discovered something far more important than walking. She had discovered belief in herself, courage, and resilience. The chief, overwhelmed with emotion, hugged his daughter tightly. "You've done it," he said, his voice thick with tears. "You've walked again." Amara smiled, resting her head against his chest, feeling the warmth of love and pride. For months, she had felt isolated and helpless, but now, surrounded by people who cared, she felt alive, strong, and capable. The villagers, inspired by the transformation, began to rethink their own beliefs. They had seen the power of patience, hope, and courage in action. Eli's quiet presence had shown them that one person, willing to act when everyone else hesitated, could create miracles. Children whispered stories about the brave girl who had walked again and the cowboy who had never given up. Adults shared lessons about belief, perseverance, and the quiet power of kindness. And yet, Eli remained humble. He did not linger for praise or admiration. He continued to support Amara, but he never made himself the center of attention. His reward was not recognition, but the knowledge that he had helped someone rediscover their strength and hope. In his quiet way, he had changed not only Amara's life, but the spirit of the entire village. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Amara took her final steps of the day, her walker now moving steadily beneath her. She laughed, her voice carrying across the village, and for the first time in months, the air was filled with joy, hope, and the promise of new beginnings. Eli watched from nearby, smiling quietly, knowing that this moment, this triumph, was only the beginning of a brighter future. Amara's journey was far from over. There would still be challenges, struggles, and moments of doubt. But she had discovered the most important lesson, that courage, patience, and belief could overcome fear and limitations. And the quiet cowboy who had walked beside her through every trial had shown her, and the entire village, that one person's dedication and hope could change lives forever. The village had changed. The air felt lighter, filled with laughter, hope, and quiet admiration. Amara had grown stronger every day, walking with more confidence, exploring corners of the village she had not seen in months, and even playing small games with children who once thought she could never join them. Her transformation had not gone unnoticed. Villagers who once doubted or whispered about her now approached with smiles, congratulations, and words of encouragement. The change was more than physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and communal. Amara herself felt a strength she had never imagined. She could now walk steadily without assistance for longer distances, her legs carrying her with newfound determination. She still used the wooden walker for practice, but it had become a tool of independence, not a crutch of limitation. Her days, once filled with despair and solitude, were now filled with movement, laughter, and dreams. Each morning she rose with hope, eager to continue her journey and see what she could achieve next. Eli, the quiet cowboy, continued to visit her every day. His presence remained calm and unassuming, yet it carried a sense of reassurance that Amara had come to rely on. He encouraged her to take more steps, to test her strength, and to trust her body. He never forced her, never rushed her, and never demanded gratitude. His reward was in seeing her progress, in witnessing her courage, and in knowing that he had helped ignite a fire of hope that had once seemed impossible to light. The chief, watching his daughter grow stronger and more independent, felt a mix of pride and gratitude. For months, he had feared that no one could help Amara, that she would remain confined and hopeless. Yet Eli's patience, wisdom, and unwavering belief had changed that. The chief embraced his daughter often, tears streaming down his face, each hug a mixture of relief, joy, and admiration. "You have come so far," he whispered one evening, holding her close. "I am so proud of you." Amara smiled, her heart full, realizing that her journey was not hers alone, but shared with those who had believed in her, especially Eli. The villagers had learned a lesson as well. Many approached Eli to express their gratitude, offering food, gifts, or simply kind words. Some admitted that they had been wrong to doubt or to give up too soon. They had witnessed the power of patience, belief, and quiet courage firsthand, and they carried that lesson with them. Children who had once mocked or avoided Amara now ran alongside her, cheering her on as she practiced walking. The atmosphere of the village had shifted from doubt and fear to encouragement and possibility. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold, Eli led Amara to the open fields outside the village. This was a place she had longed to explore again, a place she had once run freely, but which had been forbidden after her accident. The tall grass swayed gently in the breeze, and birds flitted overhead, their songs echoing across the plains. For a moment, Amara paused, taking in the vastness around her. She felt both nervous and exhilarated. "Are you ready?" Eli asked gently, standing beside her. Amara nodded, her hands gripping the wooden walker. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the cool breeze on her skin. Step by step, she moved forward, her legs carrying her with a strength she had never known. Each movement was deliberate, filled with purpose, courage, and hope. Eli walked alongside her, offering support when needed, but allowing her to experience the joy of walking freely. Amara's laughter rang through the fields, bright and unrestrained. She spun in circles, feeling the wind in her hair, and for the first time in many months she felt truly alive. The villagers, who had gathered at a distance to watch, erupted in cheers and applause. They had witnessed a miracle, not born of magic, but of patience, courage, and unwavering belief. As the days passed, Amara's confidence grew. She explored more of the village, visited friends she had not seen in months, and even attempted climbing small hills, guided by Eli. Each new challenge she faced brought triumph and joy. She realized that her body, though once paralyzed, could achieve more than she had ever imagined. And with each achievement, her spirit soared, inspiring those around her. Eli, seeing her progress, knew that the time would come when Amara no longer needed him by her side. He had been a guide, a mentor, and a friend, but his purpose had always been to help her discover her own strength. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he spoke softly to her. "You have come so far, Amara. You are stronger than anyone could have imagined. Soon, you will not need my help anymore. But remember, strength is not just in your legs. It is in your heart, your mind, and your courage." Amara looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said quietly. "You believed in me when everyone else gave up." Eli smiled gently. "The belief was always in you," he said. "I only helped you see it." The chief, watching this exchange, felt a deep sense of relief and happiness. The journey that had begun with despair and doubt had transformed into one of hope, courage, and achievement. His daughter was no longer confined to a wheelchair, no longer trapped by fear, but walking with confidence, exploring the world, and inspiring everyone around her. The villagers, inspired by Amara's journey, began to embrace new ways of thinking. They learned that patience, courage, and belief could overcome even the most challenging obstacles. They began helping one another more, offering support where it was needed, and celebrating small victories in their own lives. Amara's story became a lesson for the entire community, a reminder that hope could be nurtured, and that one person's belief could change not only a life but an entire village. In the weeks that followed, Amara continued to grow stronger. She walked longer distances each day, explored the hills and fields around the village, and even learned to run slowly under Eli's careful guidance. Her confidence blossomed, and she began to dream of a future filled with possibilities rather than limitations. She imagined helping others, sharing her story, and inspiring those who faced challenges similar to hers. And then, one morning, as the village woke to the golden light of dawn, Eli prepared to leave. His work was done. Amara could walk independently now, and the villagers had learned the lessons of hope, courage, and perseverance. He mounted his horse quietly, tipping his hat to the chief and Amara. "It is time for me to move on," he said softly. "But I will always remember this village and the brave girl who taught me so much." Amara ran to him, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I will never forget you." Eli smiled, patting her shoulder gently. "Remember, Amara, the strength was always yours. I only helped you see it. Keep walking forward and never stop believing in yourself." With that, he rode away, disappearing into the horizon as quietly as he had arrived. The villagers watched in silence, their hearts full of gratitude, hope, and awe. The story of the quiet cowboy and the paralyzed chief's daughter who walked again would be told for generations, a story of courage, perseverance, and the power of belief. Amara stood in the village square, feeling the warm sun on her face and the wind in her hair. She had walked through fear, frustration, and doubt, and emerged stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. Her journey had taught her that obstacles could be overcome with patience, courage, and belief in oneself. And she knew that no matter what challenges life might throw her way, she had the strength to face them, walk through them, and inspire others along the way. The village, once filled with whispers of doubt, now thrived with hope. Children ran freely, laughter echoed through the streets, and the villagers carried a new sense of possibility in their hearts. All of this had begun with one quiet cowboy who dared to believe when everyone else had given up. His presence had sparked courage, inspired hope, and changed lives forever. And so, life in the village moved forward brighter than ever. Amara walked, ran, and dreamed, carrying with her the lessons of perseverance and belief. The story of her journey and the quiet cowboy who had guided her would remain a cherished tale, reminding everyone that even we,